Orcs are scary right now. We love the boys in green. We love Team Green. We're going to figure out exactly which detachments are the best to run right now, and we're going to talk about why they are or why they may not be. Tune in for today's episode on Have Your Cup and Wargaming. All right, guys. So basically, we have the question to ask for the Orcs. Who's the biggest and who's the bestest now? One of the really cool things that happened in the last status slate is we got a lot of new options to play with Orcs. We got really 2 new units. I know Breakers are the only officially new unit, but Tank Bus is getting a complete overhaul and a completely new data sheet. So effectively, we get 2 new units to build our armies with, and it actually does change quite a bit of things, which is super, super cool. Beyond that, we got the huge change to the WAAAGH. We got a few points changes. Points were fairly irrelevant, but maybe slightly relevant. But one of the biggest deals is that WAAAGH change, and there were actually a few stratagem changes as well, which really will affect the way that we rank some of these detachments. So I'm going to go for we have 7 detachments as Orcs. I'm going to rank them in order for you. I'm going to talk about what's wrong with the ones that are kind of struggling and how to fix them, and then the ones that are doing really well, I'm going to talk about what is working really well, and I'm going to give you guys some ideas that you can take into your list as well. All right, so let's just jump right into it. We're going to start with the worst, and we're going to lead to the best. So the worst is fairly obvious, and it's a little unfortunate that GW didn't pay any attention to them. It is the Cult of Speed. Now, here's the deal. Cult of Speed is fun, and they actually do have some really good things going for them. For example, their stratagems are amazing. They actually have really good stratagems. They have 3 problems with the detachment, and let's just run through it, okay? Problem 1 is the fact that we're playing in Pariah Nexus. In Pariah Nexus, once we went ahead and said that units can no longer advance and do actions, that really cut down on the usability of this detachment a bunch, seeing as this detachment's entire ability is to give all of your Cult of Speed vehicles or Cult of Speed units advance and shoot, or fall back and shoot. So just by nature of being in Pariah Nexus, that is actually a nerf to this detachment, which was already struggling. Number 2, it's just true, guys. Buggies suck. I'm not saying there is no use case for any of the buggies. I actually think there is a use case, for example, for the Custom Booster Blaster. I think him having the ability to give a -1 to hit penalty to whatever he shoots is actually fairly usable. I know some people have also utilized not the Custom Booster Blaster, one of the other ones. They're all named hilarious things. As the one that gives the aura of -1 to hit. There's ways to use some of the buggies, but the fact is that their data sheets have problems. It's not even the points that they cost, it's that the models themselves are too big and their abilities just don't work in the game. We have the freaking Megatrack Scrapjet, which hits on 4s in melee, just doesn't do well, and its shooting is trash. So the reality is that this detachments, the units that have the keyword that benefit from it just are not good, with the exception of Coptas. Coptas freaking love this detachment, and honestly, they're probably too good at this detachment, to be clear. Then number 3, the detachment ability is keyword locked to almost exclusively the bad units that we just spoke about. So if you look at some of the other really good detachments, what happens is they don't get keyword locked. So Bringers of Flame for Sisters, for example, the reason why it's still pretty decent even after the nuclear bombs that GW dropped on in the last balanced data slate is because their detachment ability just affects the units. Units in this detachment get to advance and shoot. When we keyword lock it like this to honestly just bad units, the detachment is doomed for failure. Now, one very easy way to fix this detachment and make it not D and make it immediately jump up to B tier is just say, hey, listen, we're going to remove the keyword locks, and we're just going to go ahead and say, enjoy advancing and shooting with Orcs. If they did that, there's real potential in this detachment that can do amazing things. Because, like I said, their strats are amazing. They have a reactive move. They have a battle shock that they can cause. They have crits, potentially with sustain 2. They have lethals, potentially lethals on 5s. There are a lot of really great stratagems that can be utilized in this detachment. And honestly, there's some decent enhancements. Well, there's one decent enhancement. The others are like, they're locked to Death Killer Wartrikes, which sadly Death Killer Wartrikes can only lead bikes, and it's like, it's just not that great. So if you want to run Cult of Speed right now, then there is actually a viable list where you start with 18 Coptas. And the fact that Coptas are as cheap as they are right now really makes it a fairly ludicrous way to build the army, but holy crap, can you actually put some serious damage output with your Coptas when you're running the 18? And don't forget, you have a stratagem to give them a 4-up in a vulnerable save on demand, which is also very, very good. So Cult of Speed, while it may have some play, you're probably not going to be doing super, super well in any tournament that you go to. But I wish you all Godspeed and good luck. And if we ever want to see this detachment do better, just a couple things that they can do is get rid of the keyword locks, freaking give some love to the data sheets of your buggies, because buggies just do not cut it. And honestly, that's if they do 2 out of the 3 problems, this army would be very viable and actually very interesting to run in a more competitive standpoint. So let's look at number 6. Now, here's the good news, guys. For number 7, Cult of Speed gets a D. That's the only D we have for Orks. Everything else is playable. So I'm going to say some things. Some people are going to get a little upset that I may be down on some of your favorite detachments or combos, but I'm not really down on them. I'm just going to make clear that from now on, for the rest of the detachments, everything here is viable and can be used depending on your level of specialty and the amount of pain you're willing to suffer. So let's go on to number 6. Number 6 is the Greentide. So this is one of the worst detachments, but that doesn't mean it's a bad detachment. There's actually is viability in playing this army. I think this army has real play, especially if you are a Greentide specialist. There's a problem. This is a freaking specialist faction or detachment. This is the mother of all skew list. Currently in Pariah Nexus, we have a secondary called Call the Horde, which gets you 5 victory points if you kill a unit of 20 infantry models. 20 wounds, an infantry unit that has 20 models in it, or 25 wounds in it. And this entire detachment is begging you to take 20 modeled units. So this detachment is basically just saying, hey, listen, I'm going to give my opponent max secondaries. That by itself is a big problem for the detachment. Then when the detachment was nerfed, what happens is they lost the ability to re-roll their invulnerable saves of 1. That was also a really big problem. And then it got double nerfed by saying if you had 10 models or less, you only had an invulnerable save of 6, not an invulnerable save of 5. So it really got rid of the incentives to run these big blobs, except for the fact that the army requires you to run the big blobs. So it's a bit of a problem. That does not mean that the list is not doable. I personally actually like Greentide on teams still. I think you can build some very, very interesting skew list. But the reason why I say I like it in teams and not necessarily singles is that in teams, you can have some control over whether or not they run into an army that's good at anti-infantry. If you're running into an army that's good at anti-infantry and you're bringing Greentide, you've lost the game. There's really just nothing you can do about it, which is it feels bad. It just totally is. One of the big problems with this detachment is you got no way to punch up with your units. Basically, what you're hoping is that you out-OC your opponent and you can outlast them. And if you can't, then you're just going to lose, because you really have no way to kill your opponent other than just like hoping your war boss pops off during the WAAAGH and hoping that you just get a lot of AP one-choppers through, which, by the way, Armor of Contempt actually still does matter for this army, even if it doesn't matter for a lot of the other armies in the game. So that's the big problem. They do have one stratagem that will allow them to reroll wound rolls potentially, but it's like, it's still only strength 5 AP 1s. You can mitigate this a little bit if you take Gazgul Thuraka to be able to give them lethal hits for a round, but the problem is that only lasts for 1 round, and then this army's damage really just falls off a cliff, and it's basically exclusively made out of strength 4 AP 1 damage 1 attacks. There are some things that you can do to mitigate it, but you're going to have to be a specialist to be able to do so. And that's it, man. And that's just it. And since Orks don't necessarily have other data sheets to really fall back, all their data sheets are really detachment dependent. You don't really have any just generally good units to support the boys here. You don't have a generally good shooting platform to support them, for example. You don't have a generally good shock attack, not shock attack gun, but shock troops to send after them. You could send knobs, but knobs have to be led by a war boss. And the second the war boss is leading the knobs, the war boss isn't leading the boys, which means the boys can't take 2 leaders. So you can see how all these issues abound. The strat nerfs were a little bit overblown. The stratagem nerfs that they had were a little bit too much, and that just really reduced the viability of the army. Now, the army is not unplayable. You can absolutely still play Ork Horde, and you can out-OC the crap out of your opponent. You can put them in jail by taking the Word Boy. You can teleport and put an entire line in front of your opponent's army, covering the entire battlefield, actually. If you do that, then your opponent could very well be screwed and just never be able to leave their deployment zone. There are ways to run this detachment, which is why it is in the C category. It is not a D. It is not a complete failure. I would like to see the detachment rule giving them back the reroll ones to save, and there's no reason that you should drop to a 6-up invuln if you're 10 boys or less. So just give them back that 5-up invuln on boys and the reroll ones. I would also like to see a little bit of a way just to give them a little more punch somehow. And I'm not really sure how we do that, but overall, Greentide is a solid C. If you like playing Greentide, don't despair because there are ways to get it done, but it's going to be a struggle for you. Now let's get into the next two. Now the next two are tied. All right, so in no particular order, the next two armies, in my opinion, are just tied, and they are both C+ armies. They're almost B. They're like almost there. And there's real viability. You actually might even see one of these win a freaking GT somewhere, right? So we're talking about the Big Hunt and Bully Boys. Both of these I put on the exact same level. Faction or detachment specialists are going to be successful with these detachments. You can totally bring them to victory. They have tricks. They have stratagems. They have the raw power that they need to get through. They've got utility. So we like these detachments. They just need a little something in order to push them over the edge. And I'm going to talk about what that little something is. So I'm going to talk about the Big Hunt right now. But that doesn't mean that the Big Hunt is worse than Bully Boys. They are square. I'm just going to talk about the Big Hunt on this slide, and the next hunt on the next slide I'm going to talk about the Bully Boys. So the Big Hunt got massively improved, which is a really, really big deal, especially for those Snagga fans. And I don't know if you guys know this about me, but I am a huge Snagga fan, an enormous Snagga fan. But I also really like winning, and it's just so much easier to win with, say, like Warhord. I'd rather play Warhord. So, so the Big Hunt, though, now that you can just advance and charge. You don't have to be advancing and charging towards the prey. That is a massive change in mobility, and that is something that Orks in every detachment would kill for. Just the ability to get advance and charge on demand freaking rocks. It dramatically increases your threat range, and that is something that this detachment does very, very well, and it can become very, very worrying for opponents of the Big Hunt, which you have to slay that name slowly or YouTube will shadow ban you. The problems with this detachment is the strats. The strats, you've got a few good strats, but some of them are also like very So the strats aren't super great. And squig hogs. Squig hogs have a fundamental problem in the game right now. And I hate that they do, because squig hogs are like probably my favorite units. Like the beast boss on Squigosaur and squig hogs are like my favorite freaking units in the army. And they're my favorite models. And it just frustrates me that they suffer from this problem. When the Codex came out and the Index dropped the knob on Smash a Squig, which used to give the Squig Hogs +1 to hit, that was a huge nerf to them, because now that they're hitting on 3s and their Hogs are hitting on 4s, it's a dramatic change in the amount of damage that they could put out. The problem with the Squig Hogs is that they really just have no particular role, and they're very expensive. And making them super cheap is another pathway towards madness, because Orks don't, just in general, we don't need to be cheaper. Orks have enough units. Orks need units that fill different roles. What I would like to see for your Squig Hogs is I would like to see them go up to AP2, or perhaps just give them, let the Beast Boss and Squigosaur, when he leads them, give them also +1 to hit. Just doing that might be enough to make these bad boys worth it. They don't need much. They just need a slight little rules change. And if we get that, then I think that we'll see the Big Hunt jump from a C+ to easily that B category, just like instantaneously. And that's what we really want to see. Now, if you are running the Big Hunt, one of the cool things is that you are going to be able to just go ahead and automatically take 3 Beast Bosses with units of Snaggas. And those guys are probably going to go into, here we go, kill rigs. Because while I hate kill rigs, everyone knows I think kill rigs are really bad. Kill rigs do get a glow up in the Big Hunt specifically, because in the Big Hunt specifically, that's where we can actually start getting those las cannons to the AP4, which is well, it's not really a las cannon, but the war towers to an AP4, which is a huge change in the kill rigs ability. You can get like uppy downy on them. I don't know if you guys understand how interesting uppy downy is on a model that is very challenging to use, because kill rigs are very challenging to use, but uppy downy on them is extremely powerful. So there's just some seriously decent things that you can do with this army in relating to start some of these Snagga units. So I actually like the kill rigs here. I actually really like probably 2. I actually probably wouldn't take 3. I'd probably take 2, and then I would still go ahead and Take some trucks as well to fill out some other beast snaggers. I'd probably still take a unit of boys for sticky objectives. You're going to need Gretchen still, and you're probably going to take 1 to 2 units of the WAAAGHs, led by Beast Boss on Squigosaur or Mazrog. And as much as I love Mazrog, he just doesn't do it for me anymore at his new 5 Field of Pain and T8. He just needs to come down in points by probably 30 points at least. And the Beast Boss on Squigosaur probably needs to come down by, heck, another 15. But if we get the rules buffs that I was recommending, which I think is kind of on GW's radar because they tend to look at which units are and aren't taken, and we're really just not seeing any of those right now, then we're going to see this jump up into that B tier army really, really quickly. Now, as far as the new units are concerned into big hunts, Breakas, so Breaka boys, they really don't have a place in this detachment, and they don't really help this detachment out very much, simply because you're already taking the 3 beast bosses with the Snaggas, and the 3 beast bosses with Snaggas are already plenty of anti-tank. So you just don't really need the Breakas. So I wouldn't really recommend you take them. Also, they don't benefit from AS shots. And then tank bustas, maybe there's a spot for them. Just have a little bit of the ranged anti-tank so that you don't have to dedicate a unit of your Snaggas to go kill this transport or whatever. So I could see maybe a unit of tank bustas popping in here, and that could be actually quite useful for the big hunts, especially since you're already going to be running probably 2 kill rigs, and between them and a unit of tank bustas, you will be able to pop probably a battle tank or just one of those, definitely one of those transports that you're trying to get. Problem being, it's still 24-inch ranges, and you don't have advance and shoot. It's just a bit of an issue. But Big Hunt got a big glow up. The prey mechanism being able to be applied to character units and not restricted to the warlord means that you will be able to use your detachment ability, and I'm pretty happy with it. But I just need a little bit more before I really jump on the Big Hunt train. Let's talk about Bully Boys. Probably got a little bit less to say about Bully Boys because we didn't really see any big changes on them. Bully Boys are still just a very serious stat check. They just are. Now, they are back on the menu now that our megas are at 35 points because 2 balanced status slates ago, they went up to 40 points, which was an astronomical cost for them, which made them unusable. Down at 35, I still think they're 5 points too expensive. Once GW nerfed their 4 Field of Pain to a 5 Field of Pain, I think that was plenty, and they are probably valued at 30 points at that point. But that's okay. You can still run them at 35 points. This detachment will get double WAAAGH, so 2 turns of WAAAGH for any Nob, Warboss, or Mega Nob unit. And just don't forget that Warboss units include all of your Warbosses. So that's your Beast Boss, your Death Killer Wartrike. That's going to be your Beast Boss on Squigosaur. That's going to be all of your freaking Warbosses. Gazcool, Mega Traka, your Big Mech and Mega... Not your Big Mech and Mega Armor. Forgive me. Sorry about that. But your Warboss and Mega Armor. Unfortunately, the big problem here is that all of your strats, which, by the way, the strats in Bully Boys are some of the best strats in the entire freaking game. They're insane, and I absolutely adore them. And I have really no complaints about the strats in freaking Bully Boys, other than the fact that they're keyword locked specifically to knobs and mega knobs. That means at max, the maximum amount of units in your army that get to use any of your stratagems is 6. Because you're going to need to take 3 units of knobs, and you're going to need to take 3 units of mega knobs. If you don't take them, then you're restricting yourself from being able to use any of your strats. This sucks. And it's a big problem for Bully Boys. It's a much bigger problem than the points cost for mega knobs, and it is the thing that is keeping this detachment from playing. Now, there are some new units that can kind of help this a little bit, like your Breakas coming out. Your Breakas can help go be that anti-tank, but the problem is they can't make use of any of your stratagems. And if you want your Breakas to punch outside of Warhorde, you kind of have to lead them by a Warboss. And the second you're leading your Breakas with a Warboss, suddenly your knobs are not being led by a Warboss, which means they don't get the +1 to hit, they don't get the -1 to be wounded, and they drop off a ton. So Breakas are hard to use in this detachment. And that's just kind of a freaking issue. You can still run the Beast Boss with your Snaggas in this detachment, and they will get WAAAGH twice. They don't get stratagem support, but just the nature of having WAAAGH twice is quite useful. There's a lot of different things that you can do with Bully Boys, and seriously, just the 3 units of Mega Knobs can be such a stat check that it can be a real problem for opponents to be able to deny. I really like the Mega Mech, the Big Mech and Mega Armor leading a unit of Mega Knobs to do resurrection shenanigans. I kind of love that, and you can also always give them reroll hit rolls with one of your stratagems. So there are a lot of great things that you can do with this detachment, but it being so limited on the Knob and Mega Knob keyword just makes it so limited on its use of its abilities. So what I would like to see in order to make Bully Boys like a B, maybe even a B+ army, let's have our other units that are canonically freaking knobs get the knob keyword. flash kits, give them the knob keyword. Let them access the stratagems in this detachment. Let's have, like, I don't know if breakers are canonically knobs, but they're clearly knobs because they're, 2 wounds each. They have the 4 armor save. Breakers should have the knob keyword. I think tank bustas on the new data sheet that they have, they're in knob zone. I don't think they're like canonically knobs, but it doesn't really matter because we're talking about like tabletop rules. So give some of these other units that have like knob profiles the actual knob keyword so that we can start utilizing having more units actually get to use these stratagems on this detachment, and we're going to see great things happen. Okay, let's go into the Dread Mob. Dread Mob is number 3. Dread Mob is our B tier detachment. They got a awesome glow up from this most recent data slate, especially with the new, with our new units, the Breakers and the freaking Tank Bustas. Can I just say one thing? Tank Bustas with sustained hits are awesome. They're so fun. They're so great. One thing that I will caution everyone about in the Dread Mob, just because they love the walker keyword doesn't mean you need to be taking lots of walkers. Now, I'm not saying you should take 0 walkers. That's not the answer either. But one thing that happens in this game oftentimes is that a detachment will say, hey, you must spam this unit. And everyone wants to spam that unit. It's rarely the correct choice. Now, I will say this detachment making your Gretchen battle line means that you want a lot of Gretchen. Maybe you don't take 6, but you're going to take more than 3. Just having those really cheap units to be in places, screen, do whatever, is so strong. Taking Zodgrod Wartsnaga with a big unit of Gretchen in this detachment is super, super good, especially when you stack that with their freaking reactive move strat. It can just be amazingly powerful when you do that. So, this detachment loves its Gretchen, and it loves its mech-attached units. Ludas rock when they're attached to a shock attack gun in this detachment. You give them the sustained hits, then suddenly they're re-rolling all hit rolls against the unit that's on the objective. If one of them has the Get Find a Goggles, which gives you ignore cover, that unit punches up by a freaking ton. Breakers, this is a new unit that really likes this detachment. You can actually get them up to AP 4 on their freaking hammers in this detachment. And suddenly when they're anti-monster vehicle 4 up and AP 4, they're getting through all of that armor. They're actually hitting harder in this detachment than in a lot of other detachments, which is super dang exciting. All the stratagems in this detachment freaking rock. We love it. And it basically operates like it previously did, but we've got 2 new units to really be exploring a lot of builds with. So if you need some of that upfront melee monster tank power hitting, seriously, those breakers can really, really come in handy. So I just want you guys to consider some of these things. You get new units, and that is a huge buff to Dread Mob. So now they're solidly in the B, potentially up to B+. I know some people who are fans might actually say, oh no, this is one of the best attachments. That's cool. You might think that. I still don't. But there is more play in Dread Mob for sure right now. Now, let's go into the last 2. And guys, once again, we're in a tie. So I'm going to call this number 1 and A. Neither one of these is better than the other. These are just by far and away clearly the 2 best detachments for Orks. We're talking about Warhorde and the Tactical Brigade. The Tactical Brigade coming out as our Grotmus detachment blew my freaking mind. I think it was the most well-written of all the freaking detachments out there. It is clearly my favorite, and I love Tactical Brigade. It does not dethrone Warhorde, but it gives us a very real, viable alternative to Warhorde for how we're going to play our Orks. It's a completely different way of playing Orks. It's still Orks, so it still has some good melee hitting power, but I'm so happy with it. Now, I'm going to go through both Warhorde and Tactical Brigade. I'm going to do Warhorde first because it is the old stuff, but it also just got a nice little glow up, so let's kind of run through why Warhorde is still at least at the top, if not the top of the Orks. All right, here we go. I do think, by the way, actually, this is really important. Warhorde, specifically, I think is probably better in teams than Tactical Brigade. I don't think it's really, maybe I think slightly, I'm going to take the word slightly out of there. I think it's fairly clear that Warhorde is better in teams because Warhorde can just skew so hard into the melee pressure, so much harder than anyone else. And I think in teams where you have like pairings control, that's a very, very powerful thing. So Warhorde is probably the best if we're talking about teams, whereas Tactical Brigade is probably the best if we're talking about singles. All right. So Warhorde still has by far the best strats in the Ork Codex. And that's simply, they're even better than Bully Boys. And the reason for that is because they're not keyword locked. The ones in Bully Boys might actually be better, but they're keyword locked, right? If you understand what I'm saying. So the ones in Horde you can use on anything. Anything in the army can use it, which is so freaking good. Sustained 1 hits in melee is just simply a massive, massive damage buff. And then in the WAAAGH turn, you're going to get probably 2 units in your army that are both lethal and sustained on 5s instead of 6s. This is critical because you're almost always, I'm not going to try to speak for every person alive, but you're almost always want to take Gaz and Warhord because of the insane damage buff that having both sustained and lethal on 6s during the WAAAGH turn just presents. It is incredibly powerful. And then Gaz himself is just a monster because he's going to be critting on 5s even if you don't have any stratagem support during the WAAAGH turn. So Gaz is almost a huge take, is almost an auto include for me in Warhord. So you're going to get 2 units critting on 5s with both sustained and lethal in the WAAAGH turn. This army just kills absolutely everything, and I love it. One of the really good things for Warhord now that has changed since the recent balance status slate because of the addition of WAAAGHs is that our reliance on knobs led by Warboss has actually gone down because a unit of unled WAAAGHs will kill a Vindicator on average outside of the freaking WAAAGH. And this is my detachment that I like WAAAGHs the most because in this detachment, you don't have to pay a tax for a leader. Now, a lot of people still will want to take a leader with them. But if you run the math on, say, a Vindicator for our freaking, what do we call them? Breaka boys. Just with damage from their hammers, they're going to cause 6.25, which can't really cause 6.25 because it's, flat 3. So let's just say it's 6 damage. And then you're going to cause 3 damage from the devastating hammer, right? Because the devastating hammer is going to get 1 through. And then you're going to cause it 2 damage on their Squig Bomb that they're going to throw before they get their rerollable charges outside of the WAAAGH. That means this unit on average kills that Vindicator. That is a 140-point unit, trading upwards into a 175-point unit that historically we have a really huge problem with as Orks, seeing as it has that sweet 2-up armor save. This is a very, very big deal. It allows you to play the game outside of the WAAAGH, and that is what Warhord really, really needs. They need to be able to play outside of the WAAAGH. This is something that Tactical Brigade actually does amazingly well. They're incredible outside of the WAAAGH. So, but that's just a big difference between the 2 armies. Now, if you happen to be really worried that the math is exact, no problem. Spend 1 CP and throw grenades before you actually make your charge. And then you will kill it. Or let's say you have to throw grenades with another unit. When you charge in, you spend 1 CP with Unbridled Carnage to give them crits on 5s instead of on 6s. And that makes a big difference in the amount of damage that you're going to be putting on that Vindicator as well. So that's awesome. WAAAGHs really decrease the points on the knobs because now we can have maybe 1 unit of knobs and 2 units of WAAAGHs that are unled, and it's going to be cheaper than what we used to have to run. WAAAGH is at 140, knobs at 105, but now that a Warboss is 75, it's 180 for the package, right? So the math actually really works out really well in our favor there. Tank Busters are cool, and they actually potentially can be taken led by a Shock Attack Gun and Warhord. Now, I'm not doing it. It's something that I might want to play around with a little bit, but I just don't have it in me to do that yet. I always do that in Tactical Brigade, but it's a real option. So basically, the Warhord build hasn't changed all that much, but WAAAGHs, while being pricey, they're still cheaper than knobs led by Warboss, and it really changes the way that Warhord plays. So let's go into the very last one. This is Tactical Brigade. I freaking love Tactical Brigade. They're awesome. I think they are slightly better than Warhord in singles, where it's just all commerce. You don't know. Because Tactical Brigade can strategically hit like Warhord, because one of their units on the charge, you can still give them sustained hits. So you can still get 1 unit punching as if they were punching in Warhord. And then the other units, you can give them bonus strength. So you can let them punch as if it was the WAAAGH when it's not the WAAAGH. I can't tell you how exciting it is to have a unit of Storm Boys go up to strength 5 turn 1 when you don't have to declare a WAAAGH, and it really dramatically changes their damage output into things. With the free reroll charges, because you're going to issue the orders to them. You do this with commandos, you do this all over the place. I set a unit of Beast Snaggers out, and I had them charge 2 different Warwalkers. And having them go up to strength 6 outside of the WAAAGH allowed me to kill the 2 Warwalkers outside of the WAAAGH. But if they were only strength 5, they would have been winning on 5s. They would not have accomplished the goal. So I love the ability to buff our units outside of the WAAAGH. And that is the biggest strength of Tactical Brigade. It allows us to play the game when we're not in a WAAAGH turn. So the ability to reliably hit on 4s with your Flash Kits, your Tank Busters, your Ludas hitting on 5s, it makes our orc shooting actually decent because Ludas have the inbuilt rerolls. So hitting on 5s with full rerolls to hit is a world of difference than hitting on 6s with full rerolls to hit. And people say, oh, you could have gotten that with Ludas also because previously because they have heavy. Dude, Ludas will never get heavy because if you stay still, your opponent is going to annihilate you. So you're never going to get to benefit from the heavy with them, except for maybe once out of every 1,000 games or whatever. But now we can reliably get them on 5s. Tank busters you can get on 4s against infantry, which is a really big deal, guys, because what is a tank buster when they activate their pulse rockets? Well, suddenly it is strength 10, AP 3, damage 3. So we have real anti-elite infantry shooting. Suddenly your Terminator equivalent bodies are dying on 2s to wound for every armor save they fail. And if they're in cover, they're still failing on 4s instead of 3s because that AP3 is such a big deal. Hilariously enough, that also takes the shock attack gun up to that strength 10 with AP5, which is just bonkers funny. So our tank busters are actually flexible into both infantry and into tanks here, which is very freaking cool. Then lastly, we get that mech Captain Flashgets unit. This is like the Captain Badrock that we had during the index. The re-rolling hit rolls of Flashgets is such a critical ability. The only real question that we have is, do we lead them with a shock attack gun mech, or do we lead them with a shock attack gun mech or a mega armored mech? That is a good question. But you're pretty much always going to have them lead the Flashgets because the Flashgets, their Overwatch is devastating. Not to mention the damage output that they have when they're fishing for those sustained hits, hitting on 4s, is just crippling for the opponent. I kind of like the Mega Mech leading them because the Mega Mech is always going to order them to have +1 to hit, and he's going to order them to have stealth, and he's going to be resurrecting them. So even if he kills them by failing a leadership test or whatever, you're just going to resurrect one in the command phase anyway, so you're still going to have a full unit. Then you're going to have a 4 invulnerable save with stealth, meaning that there's actually a real possibility that squad just does not die when your opponent shoots them in your turn. And they're positioned to overwatch the crap out of anything. They're going to kill like transports. I've killed Angron on the Overwatch. It is just brutal. When you lead them with a shock attack gun, they get even more lethal, but they get much less survivable. So the question is, do you want to lead them with a shock gun or Mega Mech? I don't think either is the wrong decision. Either one is a good choice. I think I'm personally leaning towards the Mega Mech. It is significantly more expensive, though. That's a problem. Now, some people also like putting the Mech Captain enhancement on tank busters. It's doable. I'm not saying that you're making a super bad decision. I just the strength of having that flash gets for one shooting activation and the Overwatch activation is just so darn powerful, it's hard for me to pass up. Now, I actually even like a unit of commandos in this detachment. And if those of you guys have been watching my content for a while, you know I hate the way the commandos work in this edition. I think they are dramatically overpriced for what they do. But in this detachment specifically, being able to get them up to that sweet strength 5 with rerollable charges makes me very, very interested in them. This gives us a legit threat turn 1. Turn 1, I get to move their 6 inches. I get to throw the squig bomb. I can potentially throw my grenades with them. I can charge with the rerollable. And now I'm at strength 5 when I get into melee. If I happen to get the bonus CP from my Gretchen in the movement phase, I can then even sustained hits them turn 1. This will allow me to do a real legit move block and threat turn 1, which you can't do in the other detachments. So I do actually like commandos in this detachment. I still would never recommend more than 1 unit, and they are certainly not auto-include. There are plenty of people who will just not take them, and they will be totally fine without them. Not every list that I've run with Tactical has them, but some of the lists I've run with Tactical does have them, and I do indeed like them, which is very cool to be able to say. Like I said, the bonus strength outside the walls of Godsend, re-rolling charges on demand, freaking rock, stealth. Stealth is so good, and it's just enough to skew the math to allow your units to survive outside the wall sometimes. Sometimes your opponent just rolls 3s into 3s, and then they're like, crap, I just didn't hit the orcs where I should have wiped this unit in any other detachment. The reactive move strat is amazing. Remember, you can use that reactive move strat to screw up the opponent's Oath of Moment. Let's say that you have your unit of knobs, and your opponent falls back from the knobs, and they're the Oath target. Well, now your knobs just get to fall back into the freaking truck. Boom, embark into the truck, done, no problem. Let's say you had a unit of breakers or tank busters and your opponent falls back from them. Well, when they do their reactive move, that is a normal move, meaning they can then throw a squig bomb. So you can even throw a squig bomb off of this. You can also use the reactive move just to do move blocks in general. So this is such a really, really cool thing. I did run into one of my games. I was playing against new Ultramarines, where Gulliman gives you 2 Oath of Moment targets. He targeted my Beast Snagga unit as the Oath of Moment target, and then the second Oath of Moment target was going to be something else. And it was going to be very easy for him to kill the Beast Snagga unit. But what he wasn't paying attention to was where my truck was positioned. So when he fell back from the Beast Snaggas, my Beast Snaggas were able to do the 6-inch reactive movement, jump back into the truck, and now effectively he had no Oath of Moment target because he couldn't see the truck because of where he was positioned. So he could never shoot it, which means they could never kill the Oath of Moment target, which means they never got the second Oath of Moment target. It was just hilarious. I loved it. So that's just a little thing to think about. Big strength of this detachment is you still get a dedicated combat each turn because of the sustained hits. I do, by the way, recommend no Gaz, Kulmek, or Traka in Tactical Brigade. This is simply because you need points for more stuff. You want 3 shock attack guns in the army. You want them with Ludas, tank busters, etc. And when you run Gaz, you just don't have the points for it. I will also say be very cautious about Storm Boy spam. I think it is a total trap. I have run the 10-man Storm Boys. I don't necessarily hate them. But what I have found is that I am very, very comfortable when I take 2 units of Storm Boys, potentially 3. 2 to 3 Storm Boy units of 5-mans has been my sweet spot. I just understand that I'm probably only ever going to use that strat when I have a 1 or 2 wounds left on a transport, and I want to try to kill a transport on the charge. I'm not going to use the strat to turn them into jump pack intercessors as a plan A, for example. The uppy downy on the 5-mans is great, but I don't necessarily think it's something to rely on. I know a lot of people out there are talking about the 60 Storm Boys list, and it's a trap. It's a bad idea. Overall, guys, this Ork detachment just functions in every single phase, and it functions outside the wall, which is huge. And I really don't see any single game, any single matchup that is a auto loss for this army, and for that, it's a solid A. Tied with Warhord. I think it's slightly better even in singles, whereas Warhord is definitely better in teams. And with that, guys, I think that's it, man. This was the tier list for the Orks. I hope you really, really enjoyed it. If you did, if you didn't, it doesn't matter. Leave me a comment down below. Let me know why you disagree or agree with me. And until next time, crump on. Bye-bye.